What does the legacy mean to me is that's really a hard word. To me, it's tradition. And it's tradition founded in scholarship. The way our higher education institutions have developed ever since the Middle Ages, you really have to look at how we impart knowledge, how we grow knowledge, and it's through valuing something, that's knowledge, and it's also in relationships, relationship-rich things. Peter Felton, for me, I followed him for years. I'm like, the groupie behind the scenes. But it really is relationship-rich building knowledge within that tradition. When I started in occupational therapy, occupational science wasn't around yet. And my career started back at Temple University. One of my college friends had a spinal cord injury. I was a majorette in high school, and we were majorettes, believe it or not. And, I went on to really see how advocacy and leadership in my undergraduate career at Temple really sparked it. I had great professors. Dr. Ruth Levine-Shem is someone who comes to mind, who always told me, don't be afraid to step out of the box. You don't have to be that. Well, I went on and got my master's degree, and at the time, a master's degree was terminal in my field, at Rush University in Chicago. And then I thought, I really like this teaching stuff, so I'm going to try it. And I came here, had an adolescent role crisis, left, went to Kean University in New Jersey, and then came back again because I really saw that I liked the culture here in Kentucky. And when I came back is when it sparked my idea about teaching and learning. I really have to credit a lot to Hal Blythe and Charlie Sweet. They encouraged me to look beyond my discipline and how things could be generalized. And that was, we were more siloed at the time. I participated in my first SoTL conference back in 2008. And I talked about how we were using inquiry teams in our department to teach research. And it was really more of a service learning approach to getting students out in the community with real live topics. From there, that service learning stuff just, oh my gosh, that took off late 2000s. And we had grants here. I was a part of that. And the part of the service learning that made the most sense to me was critical thinking. So that was my spark. How do I promote critical thinking within what I teach and what the students are learning? And how do I build that relationship for them, both with content and the community? The scholarship of teaching and learning is using what you're doing in the classroom and evaluating it pedagogically and content-wise. Are students really learning what they're supposed to be learning? So as you look at it, you engage your students as partners in that learning experience. I had the privilege of teaching a writing intensive course, and from there collected data over 3 years with a colleague. And what I've learned is scholarship of teaching and learning is about collaboration. So, and we incorporated not only our students, but a graduate assistant who really helped us with analyzing data, getting it organized for us, and then thinking about how it promotes critical thinking. To me, everything comes back to critical thinking. We had a QEP also at the same time with the service learning, and really looking at how do we teach it, how do we foster it. And for me, it was through SoTL research that I was then able to evaluate, was I making a difference content-wise in what my students were learning? And was I also then contributing to the body of knowledge at a broader basis? So through that evidence-based practice, I had the content expertise. I worked in pediatrics for my professional career outside of the university. And I maintained a private practice for a little bit and then incorporated it into my service learning projects with my speech language pathology friends. We used to do summer camps, and we would take our students to the camps to be the counselors and really teach them how to be OTs and speech language pathologists, and then really think about how can they use it as data-driven decision makers in their clinical practice. So for me, again, it goes back to, it's a content area, but you can generalize it across the board to whatever you teach. And then you make it work for you and you evaluate it. That evaluation piece is really what's so important. I sound like Tim Tebow, but I thank God that I was aware of the gifts I've been given to straddle multiple cultures. And then, of course, it was just the whole amazement, me, a little first-generation college student, getting recognized like this. I could tell you, if you look back to my high school career, people would never say that I would get an award named for me, let me tell you that. And, to go through and really be a mover and shaker, I guess, here at Eastern is something that it's a commitment. And I hope I've mentored and brought people along with me in that journey. Oh, hands down, what do I think is required reading? Jim Lang's book on small teaching. It's easily digestible for a new faculty member. And then the small teaching for online by Flower Darby. Given where we are right now with hybrid education, I think both of those are strategy-based, but yet founded in theoretical sound evidence. So yeah, Jim Lang's book is one that I always go back to. Digestible. You could see our library back here, there are tons of books, but it's like being able to point someone to Jim Lang's book, I think is really instrumental. For those who are teaching online, we talk about, it's real easy, it isn't. You don't do the same things online that you do in a classroom. So you need to really think with backward design, and you really have to think much more of the community of learners in the online world. So that's where I think the Flower Darby piece really fits in. I look for twofers. Everyone laughs at me about that, but if I'm going to do something scholarly, I want to make sure that it's infusing in my teaching. It's what makes me current. It's what really brings that class to life. I try to do one new assignment every course so that it just gets a refresher. I don't get bored, students don't get bored, and I'm really paying attention then to those course evaluations. And that's the other part of the promotion and tenure guidelines, how do you use those? How do you respond to both positive feedback and negative feedback? How do you grow from them? So really putting up that growth plan using our Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning is probably the one thing that I push everybody into. And I will say to them, it's like, I know you have to do it as a first-year faculty, second year, third year. How are you using those resources that FCT&L offers? How have I maintained that relationship rich in a digital space? Well, teaching online asynchronously was a challenge. I'm one of those risk takers that tell me, I can't do it and I will do it. I have to credit Tim Matthews for that. He was one of the first people that got me into asynchronous learning. Even before that, when back in the 90s, we did virtual T1 lines. And so it was synchronous online teaching. And I learned how to manage the equipment. We had some supports, but just really thinking about how do you call in someone? So-and-so, Johnny in Corbin, or Melissa up in Southgate. What are your thoughts on that? Let's hear from you. So learning how to engage people, relationship rich. You can tell I'm a relator. So you have to pull that in. I would make myself little note cards to then say, put this in. Now in teaching in our asynchronous online post-professional occupational therapy doctoral program, all these folks are working clinicians. So they have the entry-level doctorate, they're practicing across the country. Well, what I do with them is I do a little check-in midweek, and I call them Sentiments with Shirley. And like right now I'm teaching evidence-based, so I have the background theme as a flower growing over the spring. We planted the seed for evidence. Let's look to see where we are each week. And then I highlight someone from their discussion board. Oh, Jane, you did a great job this week. If anyone didn't read Jane's post, make sure you get in there because she's got some great real-life examples. The other thing that I try to do is then I do video comments back to the students in my graded assignments. Just like, talking. It's like, hey, I really appreciate, Chris, where you were coming from. I didn't quite follow you as you were making your argument on whatever. And, then could you explain that further? I'd love for you to respond to this, or drop in on my Monday night, 7 to 8, open office hours. Those are my student hours. Pop in, tell me what you're eating. Let's just share some thoughts on this. I know you've got a child, so you may not be able to stay for the whole hour, but come in for 5 minutes. I'd love to see you. I think if we do that, people are more apt to drop in. So I really do build that relationship rich thing, whether it's synchronous online, asynchronous online, or in my classroom. It's just like bringing and inviting people back to your office after class or staying after class and talking. You find another way to do it. What would I say on the first day with the changing landscape? We've always had changing landscapes in higher education. You got to just put that one out there. But do environmental scanning. Don't just take it for what you learned. Pay attention to how the world is changing around you. Look at the generativity of our students. They don't learn the same way that you and I learn. So let's go back to what do they value? What holds meaning? How do we build belonging in the content that we teach? And take advantage of your resources at the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning. I'm big on that. We have something here that is a gem. We have something that most institutions do not have of our size. So we have to take advantage. The other one I also tell people is when you do peer observations, or most of us have to do them for promotion and tenure. Set a goal. Just don't invite someone in to check off the boxes. Was someone attentive? Were they on time? Anyone can do it for one class. But if you have trouble writing test questions, that's what you should be doing your peer observation on. Help me out there. So I really do think peer obs are a critical piece to use more efficiently to grow as a faculty member here at EKU. And then you could go ahead and submit an abstract or presentation on it. You could write about it. It just, to me, it's that twofer. It wraps around, it's the candy wrapper. How would my students be present for their future clients? You need to actively listen, collaborate with the client, because everything has to be client-centered. And if they're not comfortable with you, they're not going to follow through on whatever treatment that you're going to do or interventions that you'll do. And you have to find your passion. For me, my passion was teaching, and it was teaching both in the clinic and here at the university. And it was teaching about neurodiversity, finding acceptance, altering the environment to make everybody successful. That's not the group everyone wants to work with. So find a way to really identify your passion. And then lastly, work interdisciplinarily. Get out of your discipline and partner. That was the beauty of my service learning early on with speech language pathology, with physical therapy at the University of Kentucky, the camps we did. People do not live in just a discipline isolation in that silo. We've got to get out and partner. And that's what enriches us, keeps us growing, and makes us lifelong learners. Take risks. Put yourself out there. I've talked a lot about service, or I've talked about teaching and scholarship, because I see us as scholar teachers. But use your service also to then build your scholarship, build your teaching. Bring it back in with your leadership. We're all leaders here, and we all need to continue to foster that. So take advantage of what Eastern Kentucky University has to offer. We're a school of opportunity, and it's an opportunity for faculty too. When I started, we used to call it the Department of Speech Language Pathology, and they moved into that communication sciences, just like we moved into occupational science. So as our disciplines have really looked at the science and evidence behind them, that was where we've grown. And we've moved from bachelor's entry to master's entry to now in occupational therapy, it's doctoral entry here at Eastern Kentucky University. So, but we've been in separate colleges the whole time. It took initiative on all of our parts to foster relationships and say, hey, can we be a part of this together? Would you guest lecture here? Let's do something. And, I've had the privilege of presenting with many of my colleagues in speech, as have they with other faculty in my department. It's all about communication, which, right now CPE is looking at the graduate skills, the graduate profile skills. We have to prepare people who can communicate, and that's what we have to model as a part. Empathy. Empathy is not discipline specific. Problem solving is not discipline specific. It is in the genre of content, but the skills are still there. And then how do we talk to people? We have to consider our tone. We have to think about presentation. We have to think about reading our audience. Whether you're working in a clinical environment or you're working in a classroom, however it is. And with our colleagues, you have to be able to read the room. So that's where I go back to that idea of environmental scanning. You got to know what's going on around you. You've got to use your visionary skills. And then you've got to decide what you're going to advocate for, or, where's your warrior coming out. When I see passion is everything. That's that self-determination, and that's what will get you through when the going gets rough. It's what you want to learn and advocate for. Purpose is the meaning behind it. So how are you going to apply it? And to me, as an occupational therapist, those two go hand in hand. It's really about being, belonging, doing. Again, how do we promote that doing? And our doing here at the university is the application of learning knowledge and, applying it, synthesizing it, and creating. We've got to be curators of this new world we're entering.